Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Eating While Broke. I'm your host, Colleen Witt, and today we have very special guest comedian and podcast host Ida Rodriguez is in the building.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. This
Yes.
is my kind of show.
Yes? Why? Because you like being in the kitchen?
I like being in the kitchen and I like creating from whatever is in the kitchen instead of trying to, I love the challenge of creating something with what I have. And I think it's just survival.
So when you go shopping, do you find yourself picking up like extra random sauces or ingredients like jars of sometimes I'll see like a jar of peppers and I'll be like, I'm just gonna put that in the pantry. Do you do that? Because I'm starting to collect stuff. So when I am going through the pantry, I'm like, let's mix in this and this.
Yeah, I started. But I wasn't always like that. I would always plan what I'm gonna cook, and then I'll go and shop for the meals and say this. Monday the lasagna, Tuesday the shepherd's pie, Wednesday.
Smart.
But nah, because I got bored. So now, I do try different things.
Yeah, I usually just buy the same proteins. Well, I mainly switch to fish now, so it's like fish and chicken. But the more I've done Eating While Broke, the more I'm like, let's experiment. Or if you go on TikTok or something, you'd be like, I didn't know sweet potato could do all that. I've been messing with sweet potato a lot lately.
Sweet potato's great.
Potato's great.
Yeah.
Even though one of my friends tried to say like, there's an ingredient in sweet potato, if you eat it every day, you could die. And I was like,
that's everything now.
Yeah, like I just, when people warn you of stuff like that, you're like, okay, we're not talking about like I'm eating like 5 bags per meal. Like, calm down. One potato a day.
Sweet potatoes are great.
Yes. Now that we're here though, I want to know what you were eating during the humble, less fortunate Ida days.
That was a lot of days. So specifically the meal or what I was eating?
The meal. What you're going to have us eating today?
So it's a French bread pizza. And so this is a meal that I started to make with all the breads because we wanted to diversify it. But when I was growing up, I love pizza. I lived in New York for a small amount of time when I was a kid. And then I moved to Florida and they didn't have the pizza that I like.
Yeah.
But also, my mom is Puerto Rican, Caribbean parents. They're going to make whatever you want to eat. You're not going to go to get pizza. You're going to make pizza at home. So we, this is just poor people pizza because we don't have money to buy all the ingredients to make the dough. And bread is a great dough. It's a great dough for pizza. It's a great base for the pizza. So I would even make it with sliced bread, like Wonder Bread.
Oh.
And then because we were really poor. So I would do the slice of bread with the tomato sauce and put the cheese on it and put it in the oven. And that was my pizza.
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on here, guys. We have a saying on the show, the broker the dish, the better the story, which in this case, go ahead and announce the ingredients.
Okay, no. So we have a piece of French bread, which is fancy for us, but French bread costs about $2. So
$2 for a whole loaf. You can feed a whole family of 4.
Yeah, so you can make some sort of like I don't know, it would be that pizza that's more boxy, the Sicilian style pizza. Always some garlic powder because I love garlic, and they say that about Puerto Ricans. We put garlic on Jesus, and then there's some cheddar cheese. But you can
I'm surprised you didn't ask for mozzarella.
I was gonna ask for mozzarella, but I wanted to keep it real for what I used to make the cheese with because mozzarella was a little more expensive. So I was just keeping it a stack. And then we use some pizza marinara sauce. That is usually what we use for spaghetti.
Yeah.
There was a time where they would make this thing called pizza quick sauce, which was the same thing, but that was a little more expensive. Yeah. And my mom was like, that is just marinara sauce. So, those are my ingredients. And yeah, sometimes I would even put a little butter on the bread before I put the marinara sauce.
Does that help it in any way?
No, I just love butter.
I love butter. I will say this though, I used to hate school lunch, but the only school lunch like I ever loved was the pizza where it was the French bread.
Yeah.
And this will be my first time actually eating it outside of a cafeteria.
Oh, nice.
So the judging will commence, especially on some cheddar cheese. But go ahead, start whipping it up. Show us how it's done.
And then the other thing is that I love the French bread pizza at my school, but the problem was that they started putting bell peppers on it, and I don't like bell peppers.
Why would they put bell peppers on it?
Because they wanted to torment the poor kids.
For what? For high school? There's no kid that's gonna go for that.
No, that was before high school too.
Oh no. But let me just tell you something. I loved French bread pizza. If this ends up being a hit, I promise you I'm going home. Probably not with the cheddar cheese.
No, with the mozzarella.
But with the mozzarella, I'm going to hook that bad boy up.
But I already felt like I was being fancy with the French bread. So that's why I didn't say the mozzarella.
You're like, I'm following the eating while broke rules.
Yeah, I wanted to follow the rules.
I love that you followed the rules.
Yeah, because we come up here and get fancy, but that's not what we have. My mom would always have some of the cheddar cheese. Girl, let me tell you, I didn't keep it 100 with the sliced American cheese. That was when it was really bad.
Yeah, but you would still do it.
Yeah, with the slice. My mom would do that.
Your mom was an immigrant?
My mother's Puerto Rican. So technically they're not considered immigrants because Puerto Ricans are citizens. But
oh yeah, I didn't even.
But she
Dumb
did.
question.
They migrated here. No. But I love that you asked it because that gives me an opportunity to, to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't know that Puerto Ricans are not immigrants. But my mom was born on the island, and so she did migrate here anyway. My grandmother came here in the 50s. And so, yeah, we were eating Puerto Rican food every day. So also, having Jamaican heritage, when you want to eat Yankee food, they're like, no, we don't eat that. We eat healthy. We eat really good food. And
all your meals are home cooked. McDonald's was a luxury.
Yeah. You watching me make my mess?
Yes. We have to. And I love how you're loading it with cheese. We're going to have to put that version in the oven. For all y'all listeners, we had Ida pre-make the French bread pizza so it would be ready and we wouldn't have to wait. But this version looks very much more like the pizza luxury version. She has stacked the cheese and the sauce.
My poverty mentality set in and I was
She
very
thought she had very limited limitations.
But this is my pizza.
That looks perfect. All right. So now it is tester time. Here we go. Not trying to crunch in the mic, but what do you think? You want more sauce, more cheese, right?
More cheese, more sauce.
And was yours this thick back in the day?
Sometimes. But I love it. I love French bread.
The cheddar cheese isn't bad on it. If you're at home though,
we don't have
do mozzarella. Yeah,
I would do mozzarella. I would also play with other cheeses. You can do the 4 cheese kind, which is something that we do. But that was not a luxury while broke.
I feel like this French bread feels bigger to me, but the ones in high school were so small. What bread were they using?
I mean, they were probably using not fresh.
They were probably using like
mass
what do you call it? Like sub breads.
Yeah, mass manufactured. Like they have
like
to
micros or whatever.
Serve a bunch of kids. This is like real French bread.
Yeah, this is like the real. Like I feel like I'm eating real ingredients. So now take me back to Mama's Pizza. Whatever you could find in your kitchen pizza.
It was just remembering those times when I would come home from school and I had a lot of stuff to do, and I was and my mom had a bunch of other kids.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, how many kids?
She had 4.
4 boys, all girls?
No, 2 girls and 2 boys, but very spaced out age-wise. So I was pretty much on my own.
Were you the oldest? Or the
I am the oldest. So coming home and trying to figure something out to eat. So I had a job. I had to do homework. I started working when I was a little kid. I mean, our family gets made fun of because my little sister had her first job when she was 5 at a bakery.
I was gonna say, what were you doing?
Sweeping up the bakery, the local bakery, and getting paid. They were definitely breaking some child labor laws, but
yeah, I was gonna say. So, did they get an actual bakery to hire you?
Yeah, there was a bakery on 28th Street where we grew up. That my little sister even worked there when she was 5.
I love that though. Do you look back and say that was a great lesson for you guys?
For me, it was. I'm just tired because I've been working for a long time. So when people say I've been working since I'm like, you don't even want to know how far back we could go. But
do you ever tell that to your kids now? Like, yeah. I've been working. You're lazy 16-year-old want to wait till 16 to get a job. Do you ever?
Of course. It was so funny because many of us, like especially people who are stand-up comedians, we have such a wild ride of life, which lands us at the mic to do stand-up. But so many comedians that I know started working when they were little kids, not not 14, 15, but little kids. But yeah, so it would be, coming home hungry, tired. I didn't like lunch at school, so I would take my own lunch of whatever my mother cooked the day before. So kids would be eating sandwiches and I'm pulling out rice and beans.
Yeah.
And
you liked pulling it out. I used to hate when my mom
didn't
cooked.
like pulling it out.
Yeah.
So this was something I would be able to make when my mom was not on guard, like it was just because my mother doesn't think this is food. This is a snack. There's no rice and no beans, so it's not a real meal. So I was able to, finesse this. But I remember one time when I was in school, in college, my play cousin, we have those cousins that we pick that make up for the ones that are blood that we don't like. And my play cousin used to just die laughing because we were broke, and she was like, what are we gonna eat? And I just went into the kitchen and made a pizza. She was like, bitch, you made a pizza from bread and tomato sauce. And I'm like, this is how we do. We gotta survive, right?
Yeah. Now going back, did you have to ever look after your siblings with that big age gap? Like,
absolutely.
Because and then when you would make that money as a child, would you have to turn it into household?
No, not really. But I was in charge of myself. So I was buying my own school clothes. I was buying my own shoes. I love sneakers. So
I see, by the way, she came with a fresh pair of kicks.
I'm a sneaker kid. So I would buy my own sneakers because my mom would have me in Pro Wings, the Payless shoes. So I was like, I don't want to wear those. So you have to buy your own Huaraches and your own Air Maxes.
But when you're that young, when you're like 5 or something, I don't know if you can even remember that far, but like, what would happen to that money? Would you like save it for like a toy, or would you be like, would they teach you money rules?
No, they didn't teach me any money rules. They would take my money. They would definitely take my money.
Oh my God. Yeah, they didn't respect no child labor law.
No, I'm not going to even make that up here. Like, you see these little kids now, and they have, like, my niece is 8, and she has a bank. She has money. Like, she's money. Anytime she gets money, her mother saves her money. Nah. Mama.
Okay, your mom's, yeah. I saw, we had a guest on the show, and they said they had a Coogan account that got Cooganed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, no.
Like, yeah, that happens, though.
No.
But you were giving up your money. Though that's good, kind of. I guess from your standpoint, you could definitely get sick of working if that's kind of how it starts.
Yeah, it's always been, so not till I got old enough, even they used to steal my money. Like, my uncles would steal my money because they have substance abuse problems. So I would always put my money in a drawer, and then it would just disappear. So I learned to start stashing my money.
I was gonna say, you probably started stashing them in sneakers and
every other place. There's probably money in my old building that I forgot about because I hid it somewhere.
That's crazy. Did you come from a 2-parent household?
I grew up. Well, yeah, I did. My stepfather was there, and I grew up with my stepfather and my mom. But I didn't grow up with my biological father.
Okay.
So I didn't find him until 2021 when I did my HBO special. I went to the Dominican Republic and met him, and I did it on camera and did a documentary, and I put it on the end of my special on HBO Max.
Do you guys still have a good relationship?
Yeah, I still talk to him. Yeah, I mean, it's water under the bridge for me. Like, you know,
Okay.
some people he's my friend. Like he's not like, we're not going to a daddy-daughter dance.
Okay,
but we're still cool. And he's significantly older than my mom.
Okay.
So I just feel like what I'm gonna do, fight this older man and just, you know, I'm over it. But we're cool.
Okay. So so you're in high school. Where do you start to peek into more of the comedy realm?
Comedy didn't come till later, until I moved to Los Angeles, and that would be, I moved here in my 20s. So
Wait, where were you from before? Were you in New York?
I was in Miami.
Oh, Miami.
In Miami.
Okay. I felt like you was from New York the whole time. Okay.
Well, you know what it is? I lived in New York when I was a kid, and it never leaves you. At this point, I've been in New York more than I was in Miami, because I go back and forth. And it's really interesting how I think vibrationally I'm more of a New Yorker than I am a Miami girl. Like, I don't wear fluorescent pinks. You know, it's just a different vibe and energy. I love Miami. I love what Miami gifted me, but I do believe that New York lives in me as well.
Yeah.
But comedy didn't come until I moved here, and I came here to be an actress and a writer. And I did a roast with Chris Spencer. I was at we were roasting our friend for her birthday, and she invited me, and she was like, "You got to roast. I need you to roast because you're so funny." But I wasn't a comedian yet. So after the roast, Chris Spencer said to me, "Yo, you're a stand-up comedian." And he was like, "I don't think you know it, but you are." He was like, "I want you to go do this open mic. Tell me how you feel. If you don't like it, you could just be about your business." But he was like, "But I think you should try it." And so
that's a huge deal if Chris Spencer says it.
He did. And so I went, and I never stopped. I've been doing it ever since.
Did you do well your first?
Yes, and from what I understand, you always do well your first time because it's adrenaline.
And then,
it's the second time when you bomb his horribly.
But you need that first high, right? Because then you end up chasing that first high after that, right?
I think so. I think that's what happened for me. I mean, some people might have a different story, but I definitely did well the first time I went on stage. I was set up to win. I got paid for it. It was the greatest deceit of all times. Because I did a show. It was in Arizona at the Orpheum in Phoenix, and it was with I used to do a show sometimes on the Foxhole with Jamie Foxx, and it was Speedy put me on a show, and I went to Phoenix and I did this show, and it was like a packed house. And I did really well.
This is your first one, this is an open mic.
This is not an open mic. This was my very first time on a show. They put me on a show.
Oh, okay.
And then and I did really well. And then I came back and I did Chocolate Sundays, First Impressions, and I was doing really well. And then I bombed. And then it just went downhill from there. I just was like, and then I was on stage looking like a little kid, looking at like, is anybody gonna come get me?
Yo, is there any way to find that footage?
They weren't recording the sets back then.
It's funny to see your growth, right? And then to be able to look back and be like, dang.
Nah, I'm looking for all my footage from when I started doing stand-up because, you know, the thing about it is when you talk to like newer comedians, everybody thinks they're great because they have a good show. But if you look at, like, if you get to catalog your stand-up, like I can go back in time and see that I wasn't good, and to see my progress and my growth and evolution. And it's funny because it never stops. You're always thinking about getting better.
Yeah.
So
I think comics too also debate whether especially in this era with digital, like whether they should be releasing content. That's like a big debate. And I think that the great comics, like the more I've watched, kind of have insight on the industry, it seems like you just really have to believe that you can keep coming up with new material.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the real comedians do. Like, that's what we do. We write. It's not about getting famous and popular on the internet. It's just about continuing to grow and to evolve. And this set being better than the last set, and this special being better than the last special, which is what it's always been about. It's just now because of the internet, there's just this whole different energy around everything that's an art form. But like the true artists, the true crafts people, they're gonna always fight to get better and to keep going.
Yeah, but is it harder now as a comic to know that not only do you get to have to like passionately specialize in your craft, but now you have this different space where like digital marketing plays a critical role in a part of your success?
Oh yeah, it's terrifying. It's horrifying. We want to quit. A lot of us want to quit on a daily basis. There's a bastardization of comedy that is gross, and it's added this price tag to it, and going viral is so interesting. I've gone viral several times, and people will come to my show and be like, wow, you're really funny. You have an hour of comedy. But that's because I was a stand-up comedian before the internet stuff. So I've always worked on my craft. But then there are people who really good at editing, and they can get a good clip, good crowd work. But then you got to go sit through an hour of foolishness, and people get really upset about that. And the clubs are even talking about it. It just doesn't pay off in terms of the audience. So there's no cheating.
But the clubs are funny because I feel like the clubs are constantly looking at the digital numbers in addition to your talent. But I feel like from what I've seen, of course, I'm not a comedian. It seems like they definitely care more about the numbers now than the talent.
Well, they've always cared about the numbers, the money, but they also...
No, I meant the digital numbers, like the social media following. And all.
Yeah, I don't know, because when I go to the comedy club websites and you look at the weekends, it's mainly stand-up comedians.
Oh, okay.
There's an assembly line of comedians who are not famous that keep comedy clubs open.
Okay.
You may not know them, and they may not have viral videos, but they show up every weekend to entertain people, and they keep those comedy clubs alive. Kevin Hart will go and do some clubs, or Russell Peters will go and do some clubs, but it's those everyday people that keep comedians that keep those clubs open. They're the ones there right now.
But the LA comedy clubs don't have a reputation of, say, paying well, right? For the most part.
Well, the thing
like the other markets
they
do, right?
Showcase shows. I think it's just the market way, the way that it works. Like in New York, they have a reputation of paying more. I think the Los Angeles has now stepped up their game. We're not getting paid $14 anymore for doing sets at certain clubs. They are paying more, but historically they didn't, because this was the Mecca. They would say the thing is, you go on the road to get good, you go to New York to get great, and you come to LA to get famous. So the attitude of you getting on the stages here would always be like, you're welcome, because you're getting exposed.
And there's like an agent in the crowd or someone. Like
But because the internet has changed so much of it, I think the clubs have now stepped up their game. They're paying more. And they're paying competitively with what New York is paying. So and I work both, because I just came from New York yesterday, and I was working at the Cellar. So it's comparable now, but it wasn't.
If I would have known you were coming from New York, I would have been like, bring some egg rolls.
Oh,
bring some Chinese.
I know Chinese. There's no Chinese food outside of China. There's no Chinese food.
Oh my God. Okay, good to know. Now, take me back to where I understand that Chris saw you do this roast, right? What were you doing at the time?
At the time I was auditioning for television and film. I had an agent, and I was writing. I had a film that I wrote that was like in the competition for the Sundance Writers Lab. And I was working, as an actress, doing independent films, doing my own thing. I made my own movie with my own. I went and got money and made my own movie. But I was really focusing on the acting and the writing. And I had a day job as well.
And this is in LA at this point.
Absolutely.
But before you moved to LA, how does that conversation break out from, at this point, is it New York or Miami?
Miami. That I'm moving here?
Yeah, like, hey, Mom, guess what? I'm pursuing acting.
Yeah, no, I'm leaving. I've always been an entertainer, though. I started modeling when I was 14.
Okay.
So I've always been in the entertainment business. It was just really finding my way to the place where I really wanted to be. And modeling wasn't it, even though I had the potential to do great at it and do big things. I got an invitation to go model in Milan. It just wasn't my passion, because I wasn't talking. I was just walking and taking pictures. And I was pretty good on the runway. I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't feel like it was fulfilling. Like there were people who really loved modeling. That was their dream. and it wasn't for me. But I've always been in the entertainment business. I was performing when I was a kid. You know, I was doing musicals, and I wrote my first play when I was like 13 years old.
So you knew from a very young age this is what you wanted to
be
do.
An entertainer. Yeah.
So when you go to your mom and you're like, "Hey, I'm packing up and going," how old are you?
No, I left home. So I finally left when I was 16, and I never came back. So I was gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're like, "Hey,"
and I didn't ask permission. I just left. It was time. It was one of those situations where I was like, it's time for me to go. Mm-hmm. But I've always been. And then
when you left, you went all the way to LA?
No, there was a journey. I went to Tallahassee.
Okay.
I went to Georgia. I went to San Diego. And then I moved back to Miami, and then I finally came to LA, and I was like, this is where I'm going to be, and this is where I'm going to stay.
And then how long between that journey and Chris Spencer? How would you say?
So Chris, I was here in 2000. I started stand-up in 2008. Mm-hmm. So that was about 8 years. Yeah, okay. I was working a day job. I was working for a private bank. But at the same time, that was to pay my bills, but I was still auditioning. I was in acting class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I had an agent who is now a producer, Holly Davis Carter, which is...
How did you land that agent? Is it from when you were younger doing modeling?
No, it was me doing submissions, and they called me in, and I did a monologue for them, and they signed me.
Oh, wow.
Agency West. Yeah, wow. It was the first agency that signed me, and it happened relatively quickly. I booked a movie when I first moved here, an independent film. So it was interesting. Like it wasn't like I made it, you know, but you were
working on something you actually cared about in addition to that's the most important part. So when Chris Spencer hits you with this whole idea that you can do stand-up, I guess it wasn't completely shopping, or was it like the gas you needed to like go forward?
You know, it was a challenge. I'm very challenge driven. So because stand-up is something I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to do it when I was a kid. I used to listen to Richard Pryor when I wasn't supposed to be listening to him. And I was like, I want to do that. I love Lucy. Like, I wanted to be the funny girl. So, you know, I was like, why not? Let's do it. Let's see. Because I had several other people tell me that I should do it, that they saw that in me. And I was like, maybe there's something there. But that very first time I hit the mic, I felt like this. It wasn't just power, like some people feel power, like everybody's listening to me. It felt like liberation, like being able to say things that I was thinking and I had never been able to express before. And then to see validation from people who felt the same way, saying, oh, somebody is finally saying it. Yeah, it was fun.
Wow. Okay. So then once you start getting on the comedy scene, that takes a lot of time. So at this point, are you still doing acting and comedy and working at the bank?
Yeah.
So you're doing all three.
Yeah.
But now in LA, you're a very funny comic. So you in LA, you don't get as many ups. Like reps in, it doesn't seem, right?
No, you don't. But because I was working in the clubs that other people weren't working in. Like I was working at the Comedy Union, which is a Black-owned club that welcomed me and gave me a platform and an opportunity. And I was working a lot. So I was working at the Comedy Union. I would go to the Improv. I would go to the Laugh Factory. I wasn't working at the beginning, but I would go to the J Spot. I was going to the Black clubs because at that time there were some Black-owned clubs here. The Ha Ha, which is a Latin, an Armenian-owned club here. So I was working in the other spots. I wasn't just fishing for the show, you know, the Laugh Factory at the Improv because they had prestige. According to them, these clubs had prestige to me, and they had audiences that were familiar to me. And I felt like if I couldn't be funny in front of these Black and brown people, then I had no business going to the other clubs.
So were you averaging like 3 to 4 mics a night at that point?
I wouldn't say 3 but it would be 3,
like
maybe 3, because we also got to drive all around.
We're in New York, I was gonna say maybe 2, 2, 3.
New York, you jump on a. But I would go to the J Spot and I would do 2 shows, and then I would go to the Laugh Factory and do 1. Like, so it was just, you know, it was different.
Did you have to deal with, like, for lack of better word, like predators? Because I feel like in the being a female in the entertainment business, you're constantly faced with like the can you sleep with me? Can you,
Oh, absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? Like, and I know a lot of women that have just been like, screw it, I'm out. Like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. It can be like annoying deterrence, I guess.
None of the comics can be more vicious than the dope boys in my neighborhood in the hood.
You're hilarious.
That's the truth. None of them. Like, as much as they thought that they were like, ooh, none of them were as brutal, or as those dope boys would pull up with Gucci bags and J's and be like, what's up? And
I wasn't even thinking like the comics, because I feel like when I look at the comedians, they seem almost like a family-ish vibe. I was saying like the people that are higher up.
I would say, first of all, some of the comedians are, and they're higher up, and they are predatorial, and they have power, and they have money, and they have position, and they take women on the road, and they do proposition them, and then they tell people that they slept with them, and they talk about them on stage. So I think that there are...
Damn, even to date, like they still do that?
Yeah, I mean, corny gonna be corny, and it's gonna corny till the day they die. That's just
hilarious.
Some people can't help that. But
I would think with the Me Too, though, that a lot of them are a little bit more scared.
Nah, Me Too didn't affect comedy in that way. Comedy doesn't have a union. Comedians don't have protectors. There's just it's no church in the wild. We just out there surviving. There's nobody really regulating. Somebody will offer you a gig and say, here's $75 for the gig that somebody else will say, I'll give you $1,500 for. It is just so there's no regulation. And that's why so many people prey on it. And yes, some of the people in power will proposition women and men. Men get propositioned as well. But I think that, it's just, you just got to survive in it. For me, as a woman that's been preyed upon since I was very young, I've thick skin for, whatever. And I grew up around a lot of boys, so I have a lot of stamina for that. But I do understand why somebody would say, I don't want to do this anymore. But that exists in everything. You hear women that work in corporate America talking about, sexual harassment. It is just a reality.
It's a real reality. When I first moved to LA, it happened so much, but I was so young. I didn't know that there was like things in place to protect you, if your first job and you're like, if I go to HR, I'll get fired for telling on them. And you look back now, you're like, I could have said something.
Yeah. No.
Didn't know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are afraid of retaliation.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. So what piece of advice would you give to someone now in the game, like as a female or just a comic in general?
I always ask people, like, be sure this is what you want to do, like, and what's your why? Because a lot of people's why is like they just want to be famous, and you can be famous for something that's less grueling. Like, because of the internet, just go put eyeliner on every day and then sing a song, and then you could get famous for that.
You're hilarious.
Because stand-up comedy is hard. And you don't, you got to go in front of people, and the audience is right there. It's a captive audience that's going to let you know exactly how they feel. You can only fool people for so long. Like the real comedy connoisseurs, you can't fool them. Like the pop culture enthusiasts, sure, they'll laugh with you, whatever you take your clothes off or whatever you do, whatever gimmick you have. But those real comedy connoisseurs, they expect... when Bill Burr does a special, it is full. It's not empty. They're not spots. There's a bunch of people that love stand-up comedy and real stand-up comedians. So what is your why? Like, why are you doing it if you really love it? Because it's not easy, and it takes stamina, and it takes dedication. And then the other thing is go as yourself. Be yourself. That's your greatest tool in stand-up comedy. People love authenticity, relatability. Because you're going to eventually show up anyway. So if you're doing your best impression of who you think this comedian should be, or if you're impersonating another comic, eventually it'll wear off because it requires memory and energy. So go as you, because you are going to show up anyway.
Yeah. Now, Netflix has been going on this streak of doing specials. A lot of specials. And I love comedy. However, the amount of specials, the drive for the specials, and the end result of the specials, there's some respects, like obviously Joe Coy, or, there's some really great talent, but then there's also talent that has been historically great, but they'll release a special, and let's just be honest, it's not even close to where it should be at. Do you feel like by Netflix continually releasing this type of content, not at an A+ level, like maybe those, I don't want to use Bill Burr as an example because he's one of my favorite comics, but I want to say blank comic. It could be a top comic, and say the special comes out and it's like, you know, and we all know a special. We've all seen it, and I'm sure because you're friends with some of them, I don't even know how that works when they're like, "What'd you think of my special?" And you're like,
hilarious.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to be in those shoes, but I know I've seen specials where I'm like, wow. And I've seen some specials where I couldn't make it through 15 minutes. I'm just like, why? And then it gets to the point where your favorite comic can drop something and you're like, is it gonna like deter me more?
Yeah. You know, so I've always been of the school of thought that comedy is a spectrum, right? And there's some comedians that people find brilliant that are not funny to me. They have their people. I honestly don't have a problem with them as long as they're doing the work to craft an hour of comedy to feed their flock. In terms of Netflix, like I have a half-hour special on Netflix, and I think my Netflix special did pretty well. Some people would say that our Flame did it. You know, we are all on the Tiffany How to Stay Ready, and they would say, "Oh, Tiffany was hot at the time, and that's why the specials did well." But I don't agree with that because I do think that people quoting our jokes are asking the clips going viral and people saying there was a phenomenon. People really, really enjoyed that, especially that first season of They Ready. But I think, you know, the people who are at the helm like that make the decisions about stand-up. A lot of them are making decisions based on what they personally like. And that doesn't necessarily make a reflection of what the general population. But right now, everything is so, you know, siphoned off. Like what is, you know, I love Patton Oswalt. I know people who are like, oh, he's not my vibe. You know, I like this comedian better who, you know, dances on stage and slides across the, you know, it's just like everybody has their own thing. But I think that funny will always prevail. And if you're not, it doesn't matter who you are and what kind of comedy you do. If people laugh, then you did your job, right?
Yeah.
So, but in terms of the politics of what Netflix or HBO and all of them doing, we never know. None of us ever know.
I'm just saying, do you think it hurts the industry to some degree? But I get what you're saying too, because it kind of like debunks this question, I guess, because it's like I get like, so I could watch a comic and go, that's like, I love toxic family drama comedy. If you're Bill Burr or Sebastian, you got beat or tortured, or with the exception of like Ellen DeGeneres, or like Ali Wong or whatever. I love toxic. Give me toxic all day, right? But I know there's an audience for like, you grew up in a house and it was safe.
It's relatable.
And, you know what I'm saying? That's relatable. So I can look at both, you know, but then there's that middle colon that's like, now you know that shit was like, God, you have to know that.
We ask ourselves that every day. We're like, did you really think that? You know, I think we don't know anymore.
Okay.
I think the industry is hurt in general. Like the comedy industry has been, all of the arts have really been hurt by the internet. And I think comedy is really hurting because, like I said, we don't have a union. But when you think about what people think is funny, especially, you know, when it comes to women, when it comes to women of color, there's just all these disparities. And I just think it's just fundamentally broken. Yeah. And just specifically picking at one, it's pointless because it's broken all the way across the board. Whereas people that you and I both know who are brilliant and funny and should have be in all the spaces don't. And then you see these people who are elevated, and it's because they do well on social media or they reflect a group that's big in numbers in America or around the world.
That's what I was going to say next, because I've seen, and I'm not going after Netflix by all means, definitely not. I'm just using them as a poster child for the record. But like you'll see even competitions and you'll say, okay, they're just picking one white, one black, one gay, one trans, one, you know, and you can tell because they're a rainbow, but like you'll go, well, there was 5 fire Puerto Rican or Asian or whatever, and they just, because you could just tell by the lineups. And I feel like in that safe space of equality, it's also creating like not quality.
Well, I think what it is that it's always been 5 white guys and one person who is a woman, a person of color. And I think the transition of having to create space for other people is going to always be painful because it wasn't that way before. People were just used to, it's going to be a black guy on the show. And now that there are other people, but it takes time to
get there.
Yeah, and I think that people want to be seen. They want to see a reflection of themselves. And it's been really hard to create equality, equity, and justice in a system that was built on just uplifting the voices of straight white men. And so now that you are, trying to create some sort of representation, it's not going to always be perfect at the top because they got to figure out the whatevers. But, it's never been that way. It's always been the same voice over and over again. And then maybe you hear a diverse voice, which is why Eddie Murphy would be so phenomenal because you never heard anything like that before. Because you've always heard, well, I was walking down the street, and then somebody like Eddie Murphy talks about these burgers, who's by far one of my favorite people in comedy that I want to live forever and I absolutely adore. He's my favorite. I met him and it was not disappointing. They say never met your heroes. I met Eddie Murphy, one of the nicest people, shared his chocolate cake. He was just one of the nicest people. That's so refreshing because I think he's one of the most talented people on the planet. But I just think that when it's the same thing over and over again and then you see other people, it's going to be hard because we got to get good before we get great, and we've never had the opportunity to do that.
Well, I think what you're saying is like right on the mark. I never thought of it like that because also if say the industry has been closed off to minorities or different races, now as a minority, if you take that leap of faith, you're technically the first one through the door, beating off history of like maybe your family. Like that's why I was asking, like, was your mom supportive? If your family being like, Indians are doctors and you know what I'm saying, and you want to go against all the rules and be a comic, you got to think out of a gazillion, say, Indian people, there's only one or two taking a leap, and once that one breaks through, then it opens the floodgates of more and more talent. I see what you're saying. I completely understand.
It's weird because, like, for example, somebody said when I did Netflix, why does she always have to say like she's the first Puerto Rican woman to be on Netflix? But the person saying that, the comment was a white guy. And I'm like, that's because you've always seen white guys do stand-up comedy. But I am the first, Puerto Rican Dominican woman to have a special on Netflix and on HBO Max because it wasn't, Gina Brion did one. So she was the first half-hour special on HBO Max. I'm the first hour special on HBO Max. Why is it such a big deal? Because it's never been done before. We've never seen it. Yeah. Just like when Neil Armstrong went to the moon, nobody had ever done that before. Yeah. That was a big deal for you, right? So that's the same thing. And so I think people don't realize, like, as much as we feel like we've moved ahead, we really haven't.
No, we haven't. Especially if you're still hearing comments like that. No, it's so important to be able to see. I have a 4-year-old, right? And even just looking at Barbies nowadays, I remember growing up and it was like the white Barbies were like, it was very rare. Yeah, it was the standard. And now you go into the store and there's like a rainbow. Even the Barbies come in different shades. It doesn't even have to be white or black. Now they're like tan. Well, they're all different
like
sizes and shapes. They have hips, they got booty, they got hair, they got afros and stuff. And I just be looking at her like, damn, like we can go to the store and pick out a doll that she aligns with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The rainbow. And there was a time when it wasn't like that. And I still look back and go, oh my God, like we're in a time that's like,
it wasn't even that long ago either.
Was not. And I remember when they were first dropping those like black dolls and I was like, oh, where do you go on a wait list for that? Like, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, representation matters. And especially if you're the first to break through and take that, allow others to do the same.
Yeah, no. It's
you better claim it every time.
Absolutely. And that's it. Tiffany did something amazing. What she did was create a way for, even Flame. Flame was trans.
Yeah.
There are no trans people on Netflix.
No.
Right? That's groundbreaking to be able to say, I'm going to put these people who would not ordinarily get these opportunities, they're all good comics, Shantae Wayans is a Wayans, and it was Tiffany who gave her first half-hour special.
Wow.
So that it's just, it speaks volumes to, where we are, because people think that they're exhausted because they're like, oh, every time we turn around, women are talking about this and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that we're still not getting, not even an ounce of what everybody else is getting. And then one person wins. And so Kevin Hart now is the most successful, who's also a good person. Then they're like, it's really interesting because then there's like, you guys got Kevin Hart, black people. Why do you need more? Because everybody doesn't identify with Kevin Hart, and there should be a spectrum. There were 4 kings of comedy, not one.
Yeah,
and so I think it's just important to hold all of that into perspective. I call out the names of people who've been good to me and created work for me, like Kevin and Tiffany, because I think it's important.
Even when you watch that Eddie documentary, which I thought it was pretty good. It was very interesting to see how, I forgot, was it Richard Pryor or whatever, that caught on fire, and it was like, well, we only have room for the one, and then Eddie was the one, like, and it was just like, we're only gonna allow one sheep in there, just one. There was only room for one. So, and that's not long ago, you know what I'm saying?
And then Eddie, you see Boomerang, and you see Chris Rock in it, and you see Martin Lawrence in it, and you see David Alan Grier in it, creating a way for other people, because that just wasn't the case. And then you go to Martin's show, and then you see Martin bring all these other people along, and you see Tracy Morgan in there, and you see Tommy Davidson, because it's important to continue to create a way, because it's not happening. So we don't do it. Nobody's going to do it.
No, but I like comedy. I know comedy doesn't have a union, but one thing I do like about comedy, from afar, I'm not in it, definitely not in it, is it does feel like a safe space where, even though I was watching an episode and it was very unique yesterday, but where I feel like comedians actually support each other. Like, they don't really hate on each other from this side, from the side that's watching, Eddie or
that's
Chris
hilarious.
Or someone, create something, and they bring other comedians in. You're like, oh, you guys support each other.
A lot of them do. I mean, it's a world, it's a universe, and just like any other universe, there's everything. From there is hating, and then there is support, and there are people who are really focused on creating something and making an impact and creating change. And then there are some people who are just focused on creating chaos, and we just can't focus on them. But there's a lot of people who are like creating big things. And, look at what Donald Glover did when he did Atlanta. He created a show that platformed 3 other superstars.
Yeah.
Zazzy's in the movie theater right now with They Will Kill You. Lakeith has a movie coming out right now.
He's one of my favorites, by the way.
I love him too. Brian has a show on Apple, but that was, Donald Glover creating something. Cat Williams won an Emmy for being on Atlanta. That type of thing, because we focus so much on what's not happening and what people are not doing. There are a lot of people that are creating opportunities for others. And me, as a Latina woman, I have benefited so much from the Black creators in this business that have created opportunities for me when my own community hasn't, and I'm very grateful for it. But it's something that inspires me to do it even within my own community and say, see, this is
happening. That. Yeah.
It's true.
I love that. Now, why did you get into podcasting? Genuinely curious. Like, what made you want to get into that?
So we were talking about conversation, and we were talking about stand-up comedy. And stand-up comedy is a craft and an art form and a science. And people really think that it's just you talking for an hour. You just go up there and say whatever you want to say and be funny, which is not. It's the crafting of jokes. But we're having a conversation about all the things that a lot of us wish we would say and we didn't. And I thought that would be an interesting podcast for me. I have ADHD and I have to be more focused. I can't just sit and shoot the shit for an hour like a lot of podcasters do, and then magic comes from it. But I wanted to be more focused and structured so that I could survive in that platform and that format. And it was interesting to have conversations before, because I kind of workshopped it before I did it. And it was every time I talked to somebody, with the exception of the too cool for school kids that are like, I always say what I'm thinking, which is bullshit. But the people that were like, dang, I wish I would have said this, or, So I was like, I want to create a platform for people to come and share stories, because it releases other people from it.
Yeah.
And it was more about that, where it wasn't, I didn't have the burden of a punchline, because it was just a conversation. And then when we did it the first time, it was just very liberating to hear somebody you respect that you think is awesome and dope say that they walked away one time with their tail between their legs and they wish they would have spoken up for themselves.
Wow.
And it just became something that I wanted to do that, DC and I, my manager, had this conversation about talking about like the importance of words and what that meant.
So that's how you came. I was going to say, because Say What You Mean is such a unique name, but also like, but now I get how it came.
Yeah, it's just all the things you wish you would have said that you didn't. And then there's a segment where it's like that moment where you said something that you should have kept.
Yep.
And how we use words, how we weaponize them, how they empower us, and sometimes how they strip us of everything. Yeah. And so, we just 30 minutes, and it's everybody sits on the hot seat, and it's interesting to hear some of the things that people wish they would have said.
Wow, I need to go back and listen to some throwbacks. And you've been doing this is season 5? Season 4.
We're getting ready.
Okay, season 4, guys. And you could tune in anywhere you get podcasts. Everywhere you get podcasts. And you're doing it independently now.
Yeah, it's
which is 100% yours.
Yeah, and it's on YouTube, and you can see it. And this season is interesting. We had Little Rel do this season, and Clint Coley, and it's just very interesting to see these people, because sometimes they turn into little kids, and they're like, when I was 11, somebody said something to me, and I wish I would have said something, or I dated this person, or I was married to this person, or this producer made me feel this way, or this manager. And it's just really interesting, because it's like people that you see and you're like, oh, that's a badass. Like, ain't no way. And then you're like, oh, they're just a person.
Yeah. I like that. Because then, like I said earlier, like, I feel like once people know your real story, for me at least, it's like you can build that connection of love. I don't want to use that word love a lot, but it's like you feel like you love the person more because you broke that barrier of like vulnerability. Like, now I know you know you. Yeah. Where else can everyone keep up with you? Because I know you have stuff. Are you working on with something with Hulu, right?
No, not Hulu. I'm working on a new special, but we don't know where it's gonna go. And it is. We'll probably shoot it in the fall, but I have a movie coming out called Hurricane Seasons at the end of the year, and
you're acting in it.
I'm touring. Yeah, I'm the lead of the film. It's my first leading role, which was nerve-wracking, because I'm in there with some really like bigger names and more established actors that have a very strong body of work. So it was really a good lesson, good place to learn.
But how was it with ADHD? Was it a little difficult?
Medication, so the medication helps. But as long as I have format and structure, I'm okay. Okay. And so I knew my pages, and I have an acting coach. Okay. So I have a lot of support that I worked with for it, because it can be really hard. But a lot of entertainers have ADHD. They're just undiagnosed.
Okay. Didn't want to get in there with that, but I was just curious.
True. A lot of them.
Yeah. Okay, so Hurricane Seasons.
Hurricane Seasons is coming out in the fall. Just keep looking for it. We'll keep posting about it on our social media. Say What You Mean is happening right now. I'm currently on tour. So I am. When does this come out?
And then we have Netflix as a joke. We don't know yet. It's probably not going to come out till June, though. After June.
So then, go to funnyaida.com and check my schedule, because I have a show in Modesto in September. I'm still on tour. Okay. But I'm, getting ready to tape a special, and I'm writing my second book.
Okay. And in not trying to backtrack, and I know we probably cutting it close on time, you got married and had children while all pursuing your dreams?
I started pursuing my dreams after I got divorced, but with my 2 children. I was a single mom. Yeah.
How did we skip that? That wasn't part of that's a huge part of the journey.
Yeah, it's funny. It was so much a part of my every interview that I did for a long time. It's kind of refreshing when people just ask me about me as a person. But yeah, I'm a single mom, and I did it with my kids, and my kids were never the sacrifice. So that's why a lot of things didn't start happening for me in comedy until I got a little bit older, because I was there for everything, and I felt like if I honored my kids, then the Most High would honor me, and that's what happened.
So you did it during.
Yeah, I got divorced and I moved here. When I got married young and divorced young, and I left and I moved to California with my kids.
So you got to show your kids what like pursuing your dreams was without I guess the word would be like sacrificing them, because I like that. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that enough, especially nowadays, because I feel like there's a lot more single parents, single moms, and the question is do you sacrifice your life or can you do both? And what does that look like?
What suffered was my personal life, like my romantic life, because anyway, I didn't want, I wasn't gonna live with somebody with kids. I didn't want I didn't want a man in my house. I also didn't want children from another man because I had so much trauma from my childhood that I didn't want my kids to have a step parent. So, and I don't know if my love life suffered. I think I just put it on hold. But they were always the priority, even above the entertainment business, above work. And I know that wasn't the case for a lot of people. And I don't have no judgments against any mothers, because everybody has to do what they have to do. But for me, I wasn't going to be able to it wouldn't sit well with me to be parading around Hollywood and being a starlet and my kids in the hands of other people, suffering and struggling or whatever it was. And that was my perception of it based on my own trauma. So I wrote it out with them, and then I started doing what I wanted to do. And yeah, it was great to have my kids in the audience when I did Last Comic Standing, and they were sitting there watching me do something that was larger than life, that, I made it to the top 10 and they were sitting there, and it was really great.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, do you have a whole level of, not saying you ever battled this, but some people do, like, do you have a whole new layer of like respect and self-worth, just knowing that not only did you do it, but you did it as a mom, and you did it while, like, basically you did all the check boxes, you did it responsibly, and you thrived. You didn't survive, but you thrived.
Yeah, I feel good about that. And listen, I made mistakes, because mothers are always held to a higher standard than everybody on the planet, but I think that, I think it feels good to know that they were not the sacrifice, because I don't know that I could be with good conscience moving forward, knowing that my babies would be the ones that suffered because I wanted to be a star. Like, I think it's the greatest thing I've ever done by far. Everything else pales in comparison. The biggest, thing that I've ever done in life is my son and my daughter. And I raised my two best friends, and that's the best thing. And everything else is just icing on the cake.
I love that for you, Ida.
Thank you.
Well, everyone tune in everywhere to check out everything Ida, from podcasts to specials to touring in person. And keep up with Ida on Ida Comedy. It was
funnyida.com.
Funnyida.com. And you can check her out on Instagram and socials, Funny Ida.
Yes. And if you make the pizza, I would like to know your variations, because I'm still making these pizzas at home.
You still make them?
Yeah, I love making.
You're hilarious.
Pizza making is fun for us. I told you we do the pita breads.
Yeah.
We do the turkey pepperoni, because I don't eat pork.
Okay.
We do, we put vegetables. It's a fun activity to do.
I want to see
kids.
The pita bread one, man.
It's really good. Do it. It's fun to do it with your kids.
How long do you have to bake? By the way, we didn't cover that. How long do you bake if you do the pita bread at home?
The pita bread needs to cook a little bit longer, but so I would do 350 for maybe about 15-20 minutes watching it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really fun too. It's a fun activity.
Yeah,
not very expensive, especially like if you have kids over. You got 5 or 6 kids. The pizza making activity with the kids is really fun.
That sounds awesome.
You just put out it's like making tacos.
You put all the little ingredients, and maybe they'll actually eat it, because I have a picky eater at home. She don't eat nothing. I tell people all the time, they're like, what is she? I'm like, air. I don't know how she's still breathing.
That was me.
I have no idea.
Fun activities with the kids.
I'll do it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Peace out.